Welcome back to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Thomas Keenan coming at you today from the home office. And today's guest is a gentleman that I've known for several years at this point. His name is Kevin Hallinan. He's a very intelligent and experienced
Let's
human
not
in
get
my
carried away.
experience. But here's the story. So go back to 2019. I get invited for my very first public speaking appearance in Dallas, Texas, at the MEA, Mobile Electronics Association. They have an event called Knowledge Fest. My book had just been published earlier that year. So June 2019, it came out. This is August. And I go in, I get prepped, and I've got to go into this room. And it's a big room. It's a busy event, probably one of the busiest Knowledge Fests I've ever been to. And I get there early because I want to be prepared. And there's a gentleman in the room who's speaking before me. And it just so happens to be Kevin. And I sat there for a good probably 30 or 45 minutes listening to what he was talking about. And I could feel the enthusiasm come through his voice. I could tell that he's well read and has actually helped people implement a lot of the stuff that he talks about during his speaking engagements. And it's one of the main reasons that he's here today, because he's a wealth of knowledge. So I tell you that, and Kevin, I want to remind you of that because you set the bar for me that day. And I said, shit, a lot of these people that just listen to Kevin are going to sit in this room and now listen to me. And this guy just came in and he knew what he was doing. He was a polished professional. The approach, the delivery was on point like it should be. And now I've got to go and up my game and ensure that I deliver to these people as well.
That's very nice of you to say. I do remember that, but I didn't know what was happening in your head at the time.
Yeah.
But you surprised me by how poised you were, and you're saying that was one of, if not the first time you've spoken in front of people. Pretty demanding audience too sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that was the very first time. I've lost count since then of how many times I've done it. And I'm a big fan of communication, right? It actually happens to be one of my core values in my company. I believe in proactive communication because if you proactively communicate with people, it stops a lot of the BS problems that could fester and cause issues later. So communication is a big deal. I wanted to go in there and communicate effectively with these people. I saw what you did. And I also think that we have repetitions as every day progresses, right?
Yep.
So we communicate verbally. We communicate through body language, which most people don't realize. We communicate through technology these days with text messages, emails, and social media and all that stuff. So every chance that I get to type a message, send an email, write a blog, write a social media post, write a book, whatever it may be, every time that I get to write, I get to practice my communication. Yeah. And I consider that a rep, even though it's not speaking in front of someone in a public setting. That is the prep work getting me ready for when I do go and perform in front of the live crowd. So I think one of the reasons that I was as successful as I was on that first go round was because I had been writing and communicating effectively for years leading up to that.
So it wasn't that you modeled what I did. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. I want to know where you've gained a lot of your experience from. So let's just be clear. You're part of the Sandler organization. You've got a couple of different businesses going on of your own, which we'll get into here in a minute. Right. Your specialty is sales training for businesses, small businesses, corporations. From what I take in our conversations, you don't have a specific niche that you specialize in, because I know you have service-based businesses. Right. You've got some doctors or possibly attorneys that you're working with at this point. But where does this wealth of knowledge come from? Where did you gain this experience that got you where you are today?
Oh, that's a long story. Well, first of all, I got into Sandler almost accidentally. I won't tell you the whole story, but actually, you know what? Let me tell you the story. It's only about 3 minutes long.
Let's go.
I was a recruiter in the late 90s into 2000, 2001. I had really hit a kind of a glass ceiling in this company I really loved. I loved the leaders. I loved the managers of this company. There was no place for me to go. And they didn't want me to leave. I didn't really want to leave, but I wanted a manager role, director level. Acted as my own recruiter, found a position, took that new role, boutique firm to grow a division. It was going to be smallish, but they had me and two others. We were going to make it about 10 recruiters plus me on the contingency side. They had a very successful contract recruiting business, still do. The timing sucked though, because the timing was I took that job and about a week to 10 days later was 9/11. And so all the companies and contacts that I was calling were like, oh, we're so excited. You landed, let's do business. All of a sudden, the way I describe it is I couldn't sell my way out of a wet paper bag.
Yeah.
And I was the top recruiter at the last company of 30 people. I had a chief title. I was training. I have 2 records there that are still unbroken. I was killing it. And yet I get to this new company, 9/11 happens, something nobody had any control over. And it was awful. I mean, it was a crisis of confidence. It really was. And so we spent that first 6 months really pounding. The owner of that company and I had a heart-to-heart. I mean, we knew as soon as 9/11 happened that it was going to be rough.
Yeah.
At 6 months, very little traction. We both agreed, let's go another 6 months and see. If it hasn't happened then, let's part ways. Sure enough, another 6 months, really didn't happen. We parted ways. Right at that time, during that year, I'm thinking, man, I should be selling something, not just this little bit of nothing, right? And so through my experience, I had seen the word Sandler. I knew it was a methodology. I knew it was sales training. I knew it was good because it appeared on high-performing salespeople's resumes. I thought there's got to be something to that. So I started exploring the notion of I was pretty good naturally. How good could I be? How much better? How many fewer mistakes could I make if I was trained professionally as a salesperson? Like every profession should have training, right?
Yeah.
Why should sales be any different? The journey of getting trained very quickly became, well, why don't you consider working for us? And that was 21 years ago. So long story to say, I allowed myself to be engulfed in this methodology. It was total immersion. It's like trying to learn French by going to Montreal and not talking English, I went to the same class twice a week for probably a year. So each week there'd be a class offered twice. I took it both times. I listened to audio. Back then it was cassette tapes, or say that out loud. I think about when that was. It was 2002, right? There were CDs, but still most of the content that I had anyway was on cassette. I pretty much wore them out in my car driving around. So I totally immersed myself, and I also put myself intentionally in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
I was mentored for a short time in, going on joint sales calls, and I felt like I'm going to succeed or fail on my own. So I asked him not to come anymore, and I succeeded and failed on my own. So it's kind of the story.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let me dive in here. So you basically said, "Hey, I'm pretty good, but I think I've hit this plateau, this ceiling. If I can get some training from a third-party source, I could possibly up the skill set and become even better at something that I'm naturally good at." It's
now,
funny you say that.
Let me give you another dynamic.
Sure.
Let me give you one more dynamic just to add to the why. I had 4 kids in private school. And we were still renting. We had chosen the tuitions over the mortgage at that time. So I was making pretty good money. A lot of it was going to school. We wanted to do other things as well. And so I had this drive. And, I really wanted to succeed, had to succeed, but also wanted to succeed. So there's that element of what kind of pushed me also.
Yeah. So your back was up against the wall and you had no other option.
Yep.
I'm very familiar. I've been there a couple of times in my life, and every time that I've done it, I've exceeded what I even expected for myself.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. So now when something comes up like that, I actually look for how can I put myself in a situation that forces me to only move in one direction. Right. So where in this, because listen, every so often in life, we're just dealt a shit sandwich.
That's it.
If you haven't experienced it yet in life, I guarantee you it's going to happen. And if you have experienced it, buckle up because it's going to happen again. When those situations come, find that rock bottom, get your back against that wall. I have a 3-day sulk rule. So if you get something disturbing that happens, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally, you give yourself 3 days to sulk. Okay. 3 days, you can whine about it, you can
Good.
bitch and moan about it, but after that third day, you better get off your ass and make something happen.
Move on.
Yeah, you have to. You have to.
Let me touch on that for a minute.
Mhm.
In the 90s, my father-in-law, in a loving move, kicked me out of his business.
Mhm.
And I mean, he said, "You got to go." And it was the right thing to do, right? I'd been there for, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 something years. And I reached kind of the only other seat left was his, and he wasn't going anywhere.
Mhm.
Kind of a similar scenario, only he kicked me out rather than he basically said, "Go figure out something to do." And I loved the business I was in. So we went out and bought a business in that industry, and it failed.
Mhm.
We were undercapitalized. I had tons of energy and a lot of know-how, not enough capital. And then I didn't realize one of my employees was stealing from me. So
Mhm.
cash flow was so tight. And this employee wasn't stealing cash per se.
Mhm.
They were tanking sales because they wanted to buy the business.
Mhm. Got it.
So
So they wanted the
the
value
only
of the
escape
company
from
to
that,
drop.
yeah, the only escape from that situation was to file bankruptcy. And so I didn't used to like to talk about that.
Mhm.
Now I don't really care. I think it's part of my story and part of my drive also.
Yeah, sure. Sure. For sure. Listen, it makes you a more experienced person.
Mm,
And in my opinion, some of the crap that we go through as individuals is directly correlated to how we help our clients in the future overcome some of the hurdles that they face. It's what makes us good at what we
yes.
do,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, hey, I haven't been in your exact situation. However, I had one very similar that I
Mm,
went through.
mhm,
Here's the story. Here's how it started. Here's what
mhm.
happened in between. And this was the outcome because I took these action steps. Now, I'm not telling you what to go do, but I'm telling you that story to kind of make the wheels in your head spin and turn a little bit so you can go ahead and make your own decision.
Yep. It's effective.
Yeah, it is. So tell me a bit more about Sandler and the methodologies and how you're helping clients in that arena.
So Sandler is really characterized by a couple things. One, it's a discovery based selling methodology, which means it's all about learning, not about telling.
Mhm.
Selling and telling went together in like the 80s, 70s, 60s. Modern selling is about asking questions, and most people get that now. But it's really about understanding. So we teach and coach a methodology. I'll explain what that looks like, which is not a robotic do this, do this, do this, say this, say this. It's not about scripts, really. It's about understanding how people behave.
Mhm.
It's about knowing that no matter what you say, it's not valuable unless it's going to help your prospect, right? They don't want to hear what we do. They don't want to hear our background. Yeah, maybe a few do, but
Mhm.
it's really about, do you understand their problems? And then can you help?
Mhm.
Nobody's going to listen to your solution, even if it's the right one, until they've come face to face with their reasons for change. So we learn to ask a lot of questions. So the other characterization of the Sandler methodology, it's not a one and done. So it's not a, you're from New York. It's not a weekend in the Poconos at a retreat center.
Yeah.
It's not a weekend at the Marriott. It's ongoing, regular development. So a typical model is being in front of a client twice a month,
Mhm.
right? For a couple hours or 90 minutes or so. And so you don't learn something once. How do you learn to ride a bike? You fall down. How do you learn to play tennis? You get beat.
Mhm.
You practice, you play against people that are better than you. So we believe that we should be developing all the time, and we focus on three areas. We call it the success triangle.
Mhm.
Top of the success triangle, we've talked about this. That what I'm about to say is it's mindset. We
Mhm.
call it attitude, but it's really mindset, right? Do I bring an abundance mindset to the table? Do I bring a scarcity mindset to the table? And our upbringing, mentoring, life experience can lean us to one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
Um, so mindset is huge. That's probably, I've never done the math on this. I don't know if it's, I've never seen it in print or anything, but I think mindset's probably 80% of the solution.
Mhm.
10% roughly is behavior, meaning, am I ultimately, am I having enough conversation? So if I'm a if I'm an owner or a sales leader of a company, is every individual on my sales team engaging enough potential prospects on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? That's easy, right? I can have the best swing in the business. If I'm on the bench, it's not doing me any good, right? So it's about metrics and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy. And then it's about language
Mm.
and how to. And we teach 7 steps, not 7. I always like to say it's not 7 unique conversations. It could be one conversation, right? If I've got like in the car audio business, which you're very familiar with, that's a one call close, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 20 minutes, 30, 40, 10 minutes, you can do all 7 pieces of the conversation. We teach bonding and rapport, which is
Mm-hmm.
psychology and communication skills, not, oh, hey, you're from New York, I'm from New England. No way. It's not small talk. Everybody can do small talk.
Yeah.
It's really good communication skills. So I'm sure you probably know the book too, but the original notion we're taught as kids is practice the golden rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, there's a book in the last few years called the Platinum Rule. And it says, makes a ton of sense, treat others the way they want to be treated
Mm.
because they may want to be treated differently than you do, right? So again, discovery, we have to learn how people want to be communicated with. Then we teach setting ground rules,
Yeah.
like how long we're going to be together, when our next meeting is, how long it's going to be, what the agenda is, who needs to be in that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
when key decisions are going to be made. And we learn to get mutual agreement. And if we don't have mutual agreement, it's probably that what we're selling is not urgent enough to the prospect or customer.
Yeah.
That's okay.
This makes a lot of sense. You talk about the platinum rule, and step
Mhm.
one is basically let's establish how you want to be communicated with. And,
Mhm.
I've learned it differently through my
Yep.
experiences.
Yep.
And the way that it was taught to me is in that first interaction, that first conversation. Let's say a lead comes over or
Right.
someone is introduced via text message, email. It's, hey, Joe Smith, great to meet you. What's the best place and how do you like to be communicated with? Do you want to continue here via this email? Do you
Mhm.
prefer text? Do you prefer a phone call? Do you prefer Zoom? Me as a sales representative, I'm omnipresent. I'll meet you anywhere you want, baby. Right. But you tell me where you're most comfortable operating, and that's where we're going to continue the conversation.
So I would prefer, I'm not going to oppose that. I think that
Sure.
if that works, I'm a fan of, hey, if it's working, keep doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
for sales teams, we want them on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
So with that exception, we want them on the phone or, depending on what they're selling and what the dynamic is in person. But,
Sure.
um, again, it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It
think a lot of
depends
it
on what we're
has to
doing.
depend upon several factors. You've got company culture, you've got industry standards, you've got what's expected from the company that you work for as far as,
Right.
SOPs. And they may have
Right.
SOPs in there for a very specific reason.
Mhm.
Like, hey, if we're going to go pitch, we pitch in
Right.
person. And,
Right.
I think a lot of that also depends upon if you're in a big corporate structure, like, hey, this
Right.
is Hertz Rent a Car is going to pitch to Amazon because we want to give you your
Right.
rental services for the year, versus Joe Smith who walks in the front door of your car audio retail facility and you want to sell him a remote start.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Let me give you a good example of that. There was
Sure.
a client we had some years ago, kind of boutique software company, bunch of salespeople though, and the either I think the owner did some number crunching, looked at some metrics one day, and noticed that when their salespeople engaged director level and above in their prospect, they closed like 70%.
Mm.
Anybody below director level, the closing rate was like 30%. So he put out an edict pretty immediately and said, now this sounds harsh, right? But it changed people's behavior like overnight. Hey, you can feel free to engage anybody under a direct level, but we're not going to recognize the deal. We're not going to pay you for it.
All right.
And that was harsh, but it changed behavior like that.
Yeah. All right. So you're talking about numbers here. I want to
Yep.
pivot here for a minute. I
Yep.
think this is super important. And I know this is something that you focus on with your clients as
Mhm.
well. I do it as well, probably in a different manner than you do. And
Right.
I love talking about this topic because I learn from it every time I have the conversation. the importance of knowing your numbers and establishing KPIs, key performance indicators. So
Right.
when you're working with an organization and you want to help them dial in and get better with their sales processes and close more deals and generate more net revenue in the whole 9 yards and have the sales reps make more money in commission, because that's ultimately, how they're making their money.
Yep.
What are a couple of key metrics that you always ensure the company has in place and has really good systems in place to give accurate metrics?
All right. Attempts, connects. Now, not every company can measure these
Mhm.
as effectively as others, but attempts, connects, and meaningful conversations.
Mm.
A meaningful conversation isn't 5 minutes with an influencer or a gatekeeper. Well, it could be with an influencer, but it's not with a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
A meaningful conversation isn't Thomas picks up the phone and says, "Hey, I'm right in the middle of something. Call me Tuesday." That's not a meaningful conversation.
Mhm.
A meaningful conversation is 5 to 15 minutes, right? We can get into some of the why as to why this conversation might make sense. We can
Got
do
it.
some discovery or qualification.
Yep. So what's the breakdown? I mean, what kind of numbers are you looking for? What kind of ratios are you looking for?
They vary greatly between industries and experience levels. Like I wouldn't expect the same from a new hire as I would expect from a seasoned professional, but
Yeah.
the pure metrics are going to be the same. Like lots of companies have figured out if a new hire does less than, let's call it attempts, right? If a new rep does less than X attempts, they're not going to succeed. They're not going to build a pipeline. So I can give you a couple of examples. Like somebody in financial services who's new. I don't mean a stockbroker like Wolf of Wall Street. That's
Mhm.
like they go crazy, but that doesn't even really exist anymore. But if like someone's trying to engage, I'll slice it up into a couple categories.
Mhm.
Let's say I've got a new financial advisor trying to identify centers of influence like estate planning attorneys, CPAs. Well, they might have to make 10 of those attempts per day until they build up, 3 or 4 good, consistent. And by that, I mean, maybe 1 or 2 referrals a year.
Mhm.
That's good. Referral sources. If they're looking for direct clients, a financial advisor in this day and age shouldn't be cold calling.
Mhm.
Right? Are you going to take financial? Are you going to give your money to somebody you met on a cold call? Probably
Absolutely
not.
not.
Right? So centers of influence. Another metric might be key network events. And then within that network event, how many conversations did you attempt? Right? For somebody
Mhm.
that's selling maybe a commodity, commodity would be all right. I literally had a client selling cornflakes. They were selling cereal.
Mhm.
The manufacturer would sell through distribution models, but every once in a while, and actually quite often, there was surplus product. So these brokers would get access to that. And if you don't sell it, somebody else is going to sell it.
Mhm.
So they would literally call and within 10 minutes sell a couple of truckloads of cornflakes, right? That's a different sale. That's all about if you're not making, you know, 50 dials a day, you're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to get someone on the phone and reaching out to the list of potentials that people that you've probably sold to in the past or showed interest.
Right.
You got to get on the phone and hit them hard and hammer.
You bet. You bet.
Mhm.
So then like a 50% conversion rate is okay, but that's a good place to start. So if I have a meaningful conversation, 50% of those I should have a follow up with. I don't
Mhm.
mean call me in a month. We're talking Tuesday at 10 and I'm bringing my business partner
Mm.
or my spouse or my colleague, whatever it happens to
Yeah.
be.
Another key decision maker.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then if I don't know someone's metrics, I'm going to use 50% as a guide.
Okay.
And then we're going to track it and test it.
All right.
At the end of the funnel, a 50% closing rate's not that good.
Yeah.
Right. But if you can build so I'm a fan of reverse engineering. I need to
Mhm.
close X dollars in a month or a year. Let's reverse engineer and let the house win most of the time
Yeah.
in terms of the metrics planning. Right. And then so maybe 50 dials is what it's going to require initially. But as someone improves, they develop relationships, they get some reps. It might be 45 and then 40 and maybe 30 and 25. calls.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Let's shift gears here from KPIs and move into follow-up. So is there a specific follow-up procedure that you like to coach or implement with your clients? Are there tools that you like to help them implement and use as far as, hey, this is the software or the sales tools that I like to track all this?
So I'm gonna shock you here, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, probably not. Probably not. But I used to really take pride in my ability to follow up with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was tenacious. I would, call you until in Seinfeld language until I could get a copy of the death certificate. Right. I literally had a client that wouldn't let his salespeople stop calling a lead, even though they purchased what they were selling, until they could provide a death certificate. I paid for those leads. You're going to keep calling them, but they already bought some from somebody else. I don't care. Keep calling them. Anyway, different story for another time. Where was I going with that? Oh, what I learned is that most of the time I was following up with the wrong people.
Mm.
I would accept the idea where Thomas would say, hey, this sounds really good, Kevin, like what I'm hearing. Why don't we talk in a week? And I would say, great. How's Friday? They'd say, great. How's 4 o'clock? They'd say, great. And then Friday at 4 o'clock, I'm calling them. They're not there.
Yep.
So if a meeting, we teach this. There are 3 outcomes to a meeting, and maybe's not one of them, right? It's a no. And one thing that good salespeople recognize is if they're not getting no's, they're not qualifying, right? So we should get no's.
Yeah.
I learned that a long, long time ago. Every no should make you smile because you're closer to a yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
A yes, the final yes where you're doing business, or an interim yes, we call it a firm future commitment. Unless there's a date and time certain, unless we've agreed to an agenda, it doesn't have to be formal, but what are we going to be talking about? And to your point earlier, are the key stakeholders or decision makers going to be in that meeting? Mm. And we also teach this. So a quick little role play, right? So you're saying Thursday at 4. That's going to work for you?
That works great.
All right. Before we put this in pen, do you see any reason we might need to move it around? I'm okay doing that. But if I'm going to jump on a call, I hope you don't mind. I do everything by appointment. I schedule things pretty tightly. Or, I'm going to drive out there. I'm not going to confirm. So we actually never teach people to confirm their appointments beyond this point right now. Mm. We call it a post sell. Just nail it down and give them a chance to move it. Right? If they double down on it, they're not going to move it most of the time.
Yeah, got it.
Especially if they're Catholic or Jewish. Because we all have guilt, right?
Yeah. So here's the next question I got for you based upon some of the information you just gave me. And this is great, by the way. I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying this and getting something from it. And I know that the listeners who are diving into this episode are going to get a lot from it too. So you said before, you realized that you were following up with the wrong people.
Yeah.
Okay. And I get that you want this double commitment. Right, but how do you know who's the right person to follow up with versus the person who's not right to follow up with and waste your time?
Yeah, you're asking the right question. So I mentioned bonding and rapport skills, real good communication skills, and then setting ground rules. Mm-hmm. The next step in our process is discover pain. Okay. Mm-hmm. And pain is not a word we should use in the conversation, but it's really their why. Sure. What's going on in their world that they would want to change, right? If they're an entrepreneur or business owner, are they thrilled to death with the results financially and otherwise that they're seeing? If not, why not? Let's talk about it. So if somebody has very minimal why or pain, they're probably the wrong person to follow up with. Mm. Now, you could also have somebody who's got a lot of why, but no commitment to change. That's just as damaging in terms of wasted time. Does your gut, does your heart of hearts, does your eyeball test and your ear test tell you this is somebody that's serious, right? And we can learn to we always say, hey, be nice, but be formidable.
Yeah.
Well, you can call somebody out as long as you're, not a jerk about it.
Oh yeah, I agree with you 100%. And in my experience, the times that I have done it, a lot of the clients have been very appreciative of it.
For sure.
Like, hey, I was kind of on the fence. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. you rubbed me the wrong way, but in a good way. And I actually did commit. And now here we are 90 days later,
Right.
180 days later,
Right.
and my life and business are so different thanks to you following up and being persistent and telling me what I needed to hear, not what necessarily what I wanted to hear.
Right. So you're working like 15 hours a day. You're making okay money, but it's not what you feel like you should. Your wife's upset with you. You never see your kids. How do you feel about that? What's the impact of that?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, do you want to change? Because I can't help you if you don't.
Man, that strikes home. Um, I had a coach a couple of years ago I was working with, and he's like, "There's a couple of things I need to tell you," because he sensed that I was going to start getting myself into the coaching consulting realm. And I remember these words forever, and I live by them today. And he's like, number one, he goes, you don't have to be 100 steps in front of your people in order to really help them. You need to be one or two steps in front of them, and you can help these people. And number two, and he goes, this is the most important one. You can't want it more for them than they
Yes,
want it for themselves.
you betcha.
And
Frustration causing.
yeah, on top of that, he said, if a client hires you and expects you to do all of the work for them, because that's a big red flag. Because at that point in time, your name should be on the door, not theirs.
There are some guys in my business that, that are friends of mine. I just choose to do it a little differently,
Mhm.
but they won't talk to anybody who doesn't travel to their office.
Yeah.
Right. I do similar things, but I work out of my home office and I have for 20 years. So they're not coming here. Right.
Yeah.
But if they're not willing to carve out time, if they're not willing to stretch, and for example, if somebody's not willing to bring their business partner to a second conversation,
Mhm.
what are they telling you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. I've faced that battle before too.
Let me give you a little personal story.
Sure.
In about my first year of being in the Sandler system, my coach and mentor,
Mhm.
I would say, I need to be making more money. And he'd say, well, okay, why?
Mhm.
And he was good at that. And I had a significant why, some of which I told you, the
Mhm.
bankruptcy and never wanted to happen again. And the kids in private school and thinking about colleges later. He basically said, I'm looking at what you mentioned behavior. I'm looking at your dials. I'm looking at your behaviors. Because back then I don't do any, or I do very little prospecting these days. It's all
Sure.
word of mouth and, repeat business and all that. Back then it was all cold calling,
Mhm.
right? Lists and lists and a lot of networking. And it was good, right? Nothing wrong with it. But he said, you're telling me with your mouth that you want to succeed, but your behavior doesn't back it up.
Mhm.
And that was like a slap. That was a wake up call.
Yeah.
He was right.
What was the final piece
Oh,
that basically clicked in your head, and then you went and did the work and got the end result you wanted?
so I may offend a couple people by saying this, but I
Oh,
live
we
in the
like offending people here.
all
It's
right,
fine.
perfect. I live in the city of Boston. I live in the
Mhm.
neighborhood of Roslindale, which is a residential part of the city. But had my kids gone to public school, they would have been in less desirable schools.
Mhm.
Okay. In fact, one of the schools, the kids were really young at the time. They're all grown. The youngest is 26 now, but this is a long time ago. But the youngest, I think at the second youngest, my wife's cousin worked at this particular school, and she said, in no other, in probably no words different than I'm quoting,
Mhm.
if you put your kid in that school, I will slap you. And she worked at that school. So we just determined public school for us
Mhm.
wasn't an option. And so that's all it took.
Yeah. It's funny how that works, right? And this kind of goes back to the conversation we were just having about your back up against the wall.
Yeah.
You're aware, my wife and I, we went for kid number two and got two and three at the same time. And my wife she was a school psychologist for 10 years. And we had our first daughter. She continued working, and she worked part-time. She worked the school that she was part of basically said, hey, if you work 3 days a week, we'll continue with all your benefits.
Ooh,
Obviously, you're not going to make as much money, but we'll keep your benefits.
nice.
As a self-employed individual, I'm like, cool. You keep going to work 3 days a week because we need the health insurance, especially with this new family we've created.
Yep.
So I had to convince her to go for kid number two, which is kind of funny because she had to convince me to go for kid one. So we get busy, and we find out that two and three are coming at the same time. And we look at the picture, and it's like, okay, we've got your parents who at that point in time, I think we're in the early 60s, mid 60s. We have my mom, who's the same age,
Hmm.
and I can't, I wouldn't sleep well at night saying, hey, grandmas and grandpas, here's 3 young kids, and they're now your responsibility for 5 days a week, right? I couldn't do it in good conscience. So my wife and I said, well, what's the other option? We put them in daycare, and we're going to spend all this money on daycare. So any money that my wife is now making
Yeah.
as a school psychologist, great, we got benefits, but now this transition and this money goes right into paying some other human to
Yep.
raise my children.
Yep.
It's an option, but I'm really not feeling it. My wife isn't either. So, okay, what's the other option? The other option is I'm going to retire. This is her speaking. I'm going to retire. You're going to somehow miraculously figure out a way to make more money, and we're going to have to pay for health insurance ourselves. But
Yeah.
the benefit is that we're going to get to raise our kids the way we want to raise our kids.
Yep.
And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we knew immediately that that was the only option for us.
Mm.
I'm not saying the other options are wrong because that's a very personal choice.
Yep.
This was the right option for us. So she resigned. I think she wound up finishing out the school year, which was great because my twins were born in September. So right around June,
Nice.
she
Yeah.
finished. The transition period was perfect. She finished up the school year, and it was like, oh, good. You left school. I've got to get myself busy here again. Put the back up against the wall. Figure out what this is going to look like. And that was the first year that we wound up running health insurance through my company at that point in time.
Yeah.
And man, was that expensive. But you know what? We made it happen because there was no other alternative.
Yeah. One of the coaching points that same mentor shared with me is, listen, you can always go back into recruiting, but you got to mentally burn that bridge. And I did that.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do this for a long time. It's, I didn't know it'd be 21 years. And by the way, I'm not stopping anytime soon either. I'm having too much fun and I'm making good money. So I just love what I do. And I'd love the validation of seeing people later saying, here's what you did for me,
Yeah. Yeah. It's and you and I have talked about this countless times that we've been together in person, but there's a level of fulfillment in doing what we do that cannot be duplicated or replicated in any other thing that I've done as a professional.
Hmm.
It just feels good.
And that's when, that's why, you know this, when I get up in front of people, I'm not reading from a script. I might have some slides behind me, but I'm not reading from a script.
Yeah.
I'm reading from experience. I'm talking about real world stories, and I like to have fun too. And people see that, and I think people experience that as well. But it's that passion just comes through because I've made every mistake more than once, and I'm still making mistakes. But I can at least save people from making a lot of them as often.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's just it. It's we often talk about it in my circle of people who, I'm good, close friends with. And I've got a lot of friends who do what we do as well in different areas and different industries.
Yep.
And the best way that we've been able to describe it is the compression of time. So, hey, Joe Smith, you're gonna listen, you're a hard driven, you've got the right mindset, you've got the tools needed, you're going to succeed. But at your current pace, it's going to take you 5 years or 10 years to get to where you are.
Yep.
If you hire someone like me or you, or even a combination of multiple people, because that's how the professional athletes do it, hint, hint, folks, you're now going to compress time because our experiences and the things that we've screwed up in life are going to help you overcome those hurdles when they do arrive. So basically, by you investing in yourself, which is investing in us to be a consultant, a coach, whatever you want to call it, right? A trainer, we're compressing time for you. And I don't know about you, but the last time I checked, time and money have a very direct correlation to each other. So if you want to compress this time, if this goal would have taken you, let's say 5 years to get, let's go, like you said before, let's go reverse engineer the game plan and let's make this happen in 2 years versus 5 years. And I know if we put our heads together, if we do this as a collective unit, we can make that happen much faster.
Yep.
You ready to roll? Cool. Let's sign the deal and move on. And it's as simple as that. I mean, well, it's not that simple because you have to show up and you have to then fulfill the deal for your client as well. And that's where the real experience and the years of doing business and helping people like you and I both have come into play.
Now, you said something really interesting too. They're giving us the money, but they're investing in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Um, I have a rule that I follow, and it's I've never let myself down in this aspect. Like I've let myself down in life in multiple different areas, health and fitness, relationships, that kind of crap. But every time that I've invested in me, I've always come out better on the other side of it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
One, you probably know this phrase because you probably know who Jocko is.
Mhm.
Discipline is freedom. You got to do
Sure
stuff you
is.
don't want to do sometimes, and you got to do it every day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. He's definitely been an influence in some of the stuff that I've done. I've read all his books, listened to a bunch of podcasts and whatnot, and some of his speeches he's done. He's just an incredible individual, in my opinion. And I have a very rigid morning routine, and some of the influence from that comes from him and other areas as well. I
Yeah.
won't give him all the credit for that, but
Sure.
that structured routine in the morning for me is everything. If I don't go and perform my structured routine, I'm off for the remainder of the day. So even though it may suck, even though I may be tired, even though I don't necessarily want to get up and go to the gym or drink, X amount of glasses or gallons of water that day, I still pretty much force myself to go through it because I know if I go off of this proven track here that works for me, I'm just going to be a disaster. And it's usually not that day. It's usually not 2 days later. It's
Oh,
2 or 3 weeks later where I start to feel the negative effects.
it's the same thing with prospecting. You don't know the effects for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, right? When all of a sudden your pipelines, good news, we closed everything. Now I still have no pipeline
Mm,
because I didn't prospect when I should have. So there are two things I want to add here. Extreme ownership, which is another Jocko concept. It's a SEAL concept. It's not a Jocko concept, but he's
mhm.
good at describing it. Everything's everybody's success is everybody's fault, and failure is everybody's fault, right? And the other is I'm not going to take wrong phrase. I was going to say take credit. I haven't implemented anything. I haven't even read the book. I just got the other day Atomic Habits, and I'm about to start digging into that. I'm going to be away next week. I'm going to spend time reading that.
I had a call before this I had a group coaching call with some of my clients because I've got different levels to my program. And two people on that call mentioned that book. I haven't read it
Mm.
yet. You're now the third person in the same day to mention that to me. So if that's not a sign from the universe or God, I don't know what is. So when we get off this call here in a few minutes, I'm going to reach out and go grab that book myself.
So for example, have you made your bed this morning? Why should we make our bed every morning? Because it's a routine
Yeah,
and it builds habits,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
That happens to be a very small one, but success. I mean, this if anybody that's listening or watching that has played sports, you know that success is the sum of detail.
Hmm.
It's not a Tom Brady to Randy Moss. It's not a Randy Moss catch every down.
Yeah.
When I coached youth football, I told my kid, by the way, we never punted
Hmm.
in 16 years, never punted because I studied this other guy, myself and another coach studied this other very winning, way more winning than we were, high school coach whose philosophy was never punt.
Mm,
How do you do that? Get 4 yards on every down. You'll never have to punt.
mm,
Now, it doesn't always work, but we told our kids, you don't need to score a touchdown this play.
yeah.
If you break something, go for it. But all I need from you, you fight
Four
for 4
yards.
yards.
Mm,
That's it.
yeah.
3 doesn't get you there, right?
Yeah.
4 does.
That's brilliant. Really is. Really is. It aligns with if you ever read anything that I post on social media, I usually sign off a lot of times with small steps forward daily.
Yep.
And that's it right there. Like stop
Yeah.
trying to go for the home run. Stop trying to go for this massive grand slam, this grandiose win, and just make some small damn progress every day, regardless. Even if you have a crappy
Yep.
day, go win
Move the ball.
something. Yeah, move the
I was,
ball.
I was telling somebody, I told somebody earlier today in a coaching call. It was this kind of a funny story. I used to work with this guy many, 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 many moons ago, and his mother had made him this little crochet. And this guy was older, but his
Mhm.
his elderly mother had made him this little crochet thing for his desk. She didn't realize she was Italian, didn't speak English well. There was a typo in it, and it was crochet. I don't know if she ever even noticed it, but
Yeah.
the expression is inch by inch. It's a cinch. Well, it said inch by inch. It's a chinch. And so we always laughed about that. I still remember it. I'm still talking about it, right? But that's how you do it. How do you? I mean, I don't want to get into all these cheesy quotes, but there are a million of them that are really good.
Yeah.
But how do you do it? You just do it one day at a time.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's so true. My life definitely changed when I started thinking of it. It was just a mindset shift, is all it
Mm,
was. It really was. Going back to the beginning of this, what's that sales process look like when you guys start working inside the Sandler organization? You guys call it attitude, which you say,
yep.
hey, it's actually a mindset.
Right.
And that I want to finish up with this. Let's have a good conversation with my good close friend Chris Whitehead. I think you guys connected recently.
We did.
And we were talking heavily. Chris has got his own coaching as well. He's an excellent leader, one of my dearest friends. And we were talking about many times someone comes to us for a specific reason. Hey, I need help building the operations of my company. Or they come to you, hey, I need help dialing in and training my sales team or dialing the sales process. They come to us for this specific reason, what they think they need. And when we get into the conversations, cool, yeah, I can build those processes for you. We can help design this and optimize things. Yeah, we can help train up the sales team. But through those processes, you realize that the attitude, aka mindset of said individual, is fucked. And I could build you whatever you want. Until I fix your mindset, you're not going to be ready to go use the tool that I've helped you create.
Right.
So, yes, we actually do a lot more in the self-development arena than most people realize, and I'm sure you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't sell it to our clients that way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because if I got you on a sales call and I'm like, hey man, now you want to work with me, you want to, do some cool things. Hey, the real problem isn't your business, it's you. And you're a disaster and a mess. And I've got to fix you before I fix your company. No one's going to buy because everyone thinks they're perfect.
That's right. I can't tell you how many times I've said to an executive or a business owner, you pick and choose. You don't say this all the time, but Thomas, what if I find out that you're the problem? Because I suspect they are, right? And that's a litmus test.
Yeah.
I don't care if the guy says, I will hate it, but I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they got to be willing to change, as you said.
They do. They have to be willing to change 100%.
Yeah.
All right. We covered some really cool stuff on this episode. I'm just super grateful that you came in. You spent nearly an hour with me, and the conversation's been fantastic. Let's get to the cheesy point of the podcast, which everyone does. But I need to know, and the listeners here need to know where they can connect with you, learn more about what you do, what you offer, and how you can help people.
All right. The easiest thing is to, I don't know if you can put this up or if you have the ability to do that. But
yeah, we'll have all this in the show notes.
Perfect. It's first name dot last name, Kevin.Hallinan at Sandler.com. Really easy. I have the same personal email for Comcast, but you can send me it there too. Anybody that wants to, if they forget that, they just Google my name and Winning Inc., Winning Incorporated. You'll find me there too.
Awesome.
You can go on our website. You can connect with me there. Easiest is Kevin.Hallinan at Sandler.com. I'll get back to you within a couple of days.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. Grateful for you coming in here today and chopping it up with me. And we definitely, we delivered some good value to the people who are going to listen to this. And I just really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks.
Have a great day.
All right. You too. See you, everybody.